So today we'll start with creating functions. Okay, we'll understand what is functions. Okay, now so far we have used inbuilt function, right? We created function. We used already defined function, like we say print, right? So when you say print, we use simply the function name, but it does a lot of activity, right? It prints onto the screen. Okay, so now we will see how do we write, okay, or how do we create our own function. So we have function like inbuilt function, okay. So this one, like, you have this print, type, right, input. These are some of the inbuilt functions that we have used, much more than these, right? We have len. Now we are going to create what is called as UDF, user defined function. User-defined functions are the ones that we are going to define. And this is the topic now. After that, towards the end, we'll also talk about, we call them anonymous function or one-line function. Okay, so your lambda is one-line function that we spoke a few minutes back. So towards the end of, after end of this chapter or towards the end of this topic, we will talk about one-line function. Okay. So last two. So first one we know, we have been using first two, right? Absolutely no problem with the first two. The first one, right? Not the first two, first one. And the last two, like UDF and online, not online, sorry, one line, okay, or anonymous function. We will see, okay, today. So let's get started with this. But what is function basically? Okay, function is writing few lines of code and giving it a name. Okay, so you have something called as function definition and function using the function. So you have function definition and function calling, right? So for example, if you take print itself, somebody has already defined the print, right? Print is already defined. Okay. Now we are only calling them, right? So first you have to define it, because if you can't define it, you can't call it. Like it's like naming, right? You are given a name. I'm given a name. Okay. So that is called definition. Okay. Now, but just by assigning name doesn't mean that we are getting called. Somebody has to call out by our name. Only then we will respond. So similarly, functions have been defined. So many functions have been defined, but they don't become active until they are called. When we call them only, they become active. So for example, let's say I want to print 5 things, okay? Like, who are you? Okay, print, what are you doing? Okay, where are you going? Okay, let's have these 3 lines of code. Of course, when I run it, these 3 lines will give the output, correct? But let's
Yeah.
say I want to give it a name. Okay, I want to give this a name. Okay, so I'll give it a name, def. So it starts with the word def. Def means defining. We are defining a function. So def, some text. So some text is the name. And then you give bracket open and close. So function will always have bracket open and close. We are defining a function. So you'll say def some text bracket open and close. Then you give colon. And these 3 lines of code belongs to this function. So I'll push them inside, indicating that they belong to this part. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So now when you run it, what happens? Nothing happens. Okay. This is called function definition. This is called function definition. Defining the function. It's like giving the name, right? Giving 3 statements a name. The name is some text. Now, so I just said, right, but defining doesn't mean that we become active. We have to be called. Okay. So somebody has already defined print, but when then what we do, we call the function, we call print. So when I call some text here, and now when you run, see, these lines are called, right? It's like calling you. If I call you, okay, you will respond, right?
Yeah.
So respond means, printing these 3 lines for this function. Now, if I do it 100 times, okay, this will be called 100 times. Okay, so it's like you are doing some activity, and now that activity, okay, you will have to call multiple times, let's say. Okay,
Okay.
now the difference between loop and this is, loop when you call 10 times, continuously it will be called 10 times. At the same very moment, it will be called 10 times, right? At same very moment, it will be called 10 times. But in this case, it is not called at that moment. I can call it once and then do something else. Okay. And then again, you call it. Then again, you do something else. Again, you call it. So you're not calling in continuation, but you are calling it whenever you want to. That's the beauty of functions. You write it once, but you can use it, call it multiple times. I don't have to write this again 3 lines again every time, right? So you define it once and you call multiple times. Okay, so this is the job of function. Function is you write some code, put them together, and give it a name. Okay. So this is a simple function. You write with def is a keyword, function name followed by bracket, open and close. Okay. Now,
Okay.
now you can have function that returns you some value. So if you remember, okay, um, when we did set theory, or even when we did uh, list, okay, so let me create a list. So I create a list 1 equal to empty. Now when I say list 1 dot append 5, now when I print this, okay, what happens? You get none. Okay, now see, if I print list 1, I'll get 5 in the list. But when I'm printing the list dot append, okay, and getting none, that means this list is returning this append function. Append function is a function, right? Method returning nothing. So for example, this function also returns nothing. So if I say simply here, print, I'll say printing some text, print some text. Okay. And when you run it, it'll give you none. Okay, that means it is returning nothing. There's nothing to return. It's doing the activity, okay, whatever you have asked, but it is giving you nothing. Okay. Sometimes, okay, you can ask it to return something. Okay, so how does that work? So we can have, okay, let me create some other function here now. I'm creating one more function, some text one, I call it. Okay, and here I'm saying return 100. Okay, now when I print some text one, okay, some text one, and now when you run it, see, it is returning 100. So your function can return a value or may not return a value. When you say value, it can be integer, float, string, list, tuple, dictionary, set, anything. It can be anything. Okay. It can return more than one also. I can say 100, 200, 300. That means then you're returning 3 values, 3 integer values. Okay. It can return any number of values. Point 1. Point 2. Okay. It's not compulsory. Not that all functions should return. Some function will return, some will not return. So in this case, some text one is returning a output here, okay, which is return 1. Okay, so this is how I like to see. Okay, let's say you go to a shop, okay, and you tell the shopkeeper to give you let's say you buy a chips packet. So when you buy a chips, you get chips in your hand, right? So this is like return, you're getting something in your hand. Some occasion you may not get anything, okay? You may not get something, but some instance you have to give, okay? Let's say you want to print a Xerox. Now to print a Xerox, you have to give a Xerox original copy, right? That's when you'll get a photocopy of that. So you can have a function which takes some value, okay? So I can create a function here which says some text to, and I'll pass name. Let's say Sachin. Okay. Now when you call it, okay. Okay. Now see here, this I want to pass this value, but this value will not be passed like that. Okay. I'm going to put a variable called name, let's say. Okay. Now I'm going to say here, okay, I'll copy this and I don't have to return. Okay. I'll say, who are you, Mr. Sachin? Okay. Right. I'll, okay. Okay. So now I'm saying some text to, and here I'm passing a value, right? So now when I have to call it, okay, so I will say some text to, okay, some text to, and I'll say Sachin. So I'm passing a value here. This is using a variable. Okay, if I don't pass this, then I'll get error. Okay, because it is expecting, okay, it is expecting that you give some value. It says missing one required position argument. We'll talk about required position argument tomorrow, okay? But understand this, says missing one argument, okay? It is expecting that you pass something for this. It's a variable and it needs a value, and we are not passing the value. Now if I pass here Sachin here, now when you write it, it says, who are you, Mr. Sachin? What are you doing, Mr. Sachin? Where are you going, Mr. Sachin? Right? So we are passing this value and this value is going here. So what we have seen, function may not take any value, may not return any value. Function may not take any value, but it can return a value. Function can take a value, but may not return anything. Now, if you talk about this append, can you tell me out of the three types that we discussed, which type this belongs to? Third type. So append belongs to the third type. Okay, you have a function name and we are passing a value. So append is a function name and it takes one value 5. Okay, if I don't give 5, append will throw error because append expects exactly one value. Similarly, our function some text also expects one value. Okay, so you can have a function without input value, okay, without return value. It can have a function with just return value. It can have a function with just input value. It can have a function, I call it as addition, okay, where you pass A and B, okay, and you say C equal to A plus B, and you say return C, right? So now, okay, addition A comma B. So now I'll say print addition of 5 and 10 is, okay, and I call comma addition 5 comma 10. So when I run 5 comma 10, you see it's giving 15 because it's taking 5 and 10, adding them together and returning C. Okay, so you can have a function with or without input parameter. You can have a function with or without return values. So functions are basically a name that we give to block of code. So this consists a block of code with a specific name. So that when you want to call them, it's a predefined. Okay, so see, I have to declare addition before calling it. I cannot call addition here and then declare here. Okay, if I, let's say I remove from here and add it here. Okay. No, then this will not work because this is looking upward.
Yeah.
Okay. I cannot call you by your name before you are given a name, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's the same thing. Okay. You are given a name. This is definition. Okay. So you are given a name and then you are called. Okay. So function is basically you have a block of code which has its own name. Okay. It can take input parameters and it can give return. It can or may not, right? Not always.
Yeah.
Okay. This is your type, functions. Okay. We'll stop here for today. And tomorrow we'll talk